Okay, so this lecture is going to address 21.3 in your chapter 21. And what we're going to do is we're going to be looking at um, the different supergroups that we find in the eukarya. So we're going to start today and look at excavates and talk just briefly about them. So excavates are protists, and they have unwalled cells, and they typically have one or more flagella. And they get their name, when I hear the word excavate, I'm thinking of digging, but theirs actually comes from a groove that you find on this organism that helps with feeding, functions in feeding. And there's two um, major groups within there, or major lineages. They're called the metamonads and the euglenids, and so we're going to be looking at those a little bit more closely. So the metamonads, they lack a mitochondria, and they have multiple flagella. So we know that if you're lacking that mitochondria, of course, that means that you are going to produce ATP through an anaerobic mechanism. So within the metamonads, we find something called the diplomonads. The di, to me, helps remember the two identical nuclei. And these typically live inside of an animal. And one of them causes a disorder called geodasis. And basically what this is, it's a protist that has a parasitic relationship with animals, and it will embed in the intestinal lining of an animal, and it basically sucks up all their nutrients, so they're not getting what they need in order to have a full nutritious diet, because this parasite is taking some of that nutrition from them. Humans can get this. For humans, it causes some severe gastrointestinal issues like diarrhea, cramping, things like that. And so what happens is you would have to take some type of medication, like an anti-protozoal medicine, that would help to rid you of that parasitic protist. The way that we would get it would, one of the big ways is that we get it from drinking contaminated water, because what happens is animals who shed this parasite cysts through their feces can end up in water supplies, and then you ingest that, and then it's just in the best situation ever. So it goes from being a dormant cyst to an active parasite, an active protist, and that's when you begin to develop all of these side effects. Another metamonad that we find is the parabasalids. The parabasalids, they have an undulating membrane that it's different than your diplomonads, because it has several of these beating flagella and then this membrane on top of it. And it looks almost like a strange fish. And I'm going to show you a picture of it in just a second. These have modified mitochondria. So your diplomonads, they had non-functioning mitochondria, whereas the parabasalids, they have a modified mitochondria, and they produce ATP and hydrogen as their byproducts when they go through respiration. One of them that is pretty common, or one that we learn about, is Trichomonas vaginalis. It causes trichomoniasis, which is a disease that infects human urinary tracts and the reproductive tract. Men can get this, but they typically don't have symptoms. Instead, women tend to be the ones that develop the symptoms, and it's usually passed through sexual intercourse. So what happens is this protist is passed through sexual intercourse, and it embeds in the vaginal canal or the urinary tract, and it begins to just, live there. So what happens is it causes inflammation of those tracts, for women, vaginal soreness, itching, and discharge. But even in men who may not show symptoms of it, they will develop, there are long lasting symptoms. For both males and females, you can have infertility. It actually increases your risk of HIV infection. But once again, it's a pretty easy cure if you're able to be diagnosed, because they would just give you an anti-protozoal drug, just like for giardiasis. So let me show you a picture. So this is the excavate. This is a diplomonad. This is the one that caused giardiasis in animals. And then this is your parabacillid. You see, I told you it kind of looks like a weird little fish. You can see the multiple flagella, and then this undulating membrane that's kind of like a fin almost. And this is the one that causes trichomoniasis for humans. So those are our metamonads. So now what we're going to do is we're going to move to another group, and these are called the euglenids. So euglenids are also flagellated, so you'll find a flagella, and they have multiple mitochondria, which of course allows them to be aerobic, which is interesting. Compared to your others. But what's most interesting about these mitochondria is that a lot of these euglenids, or some of these euglenids, are mixotrophs, which means that they can switch from being autotrophic to heterotrophic. All of them are heterotrophs, but some of them have this ability to switch over to become autotrophs if the environment deems necessary. So when we talk about them, we have euglenids, and euglenids are one group. And one thing in those euglenids that we find are kinetoplastids. And these have just one very large mitochondria. It is actually found near the base of their flagella. And, studies have shown us that basically it's just a big clump of mitochondrial DNA. And the name of it is the kinetoplast, so hence the name kinetoplastids was given to it. One example of a euglenid, and this one's kind of interesting, is the trypanosomes. I remember studying this in one of my classes when I was at Southern. We studied the African sleeping sickness, and it's African trypanomyosis, and it's actually passed by a bug. It's a little fly that's known as the tsetse fly. And what happens is that little fly bites you, injects this protist into you, and it causes this illness known as African sleeping sickness. And what happens is, the reason why it's called that is because the protist affects the brain, and so your brain's sleep cycle is completely altered. And if not treated, it's fatal. So it's a sleeping sickness. The other one is Chagas disease. This one we find in Central America, South America. It's also passed by an insect as well. These little insects will bite you, and once again, they will inject this protist into the bloodstream. And when it does that, it causes severe heart damage, and then it can eventually affect some of the digestive organs. And once again, if untreated, you can have some lasting side effects because of these particular protists. And here is your picture of a trypanosome that's infecting the red blood cell there. This is the one that we find from the tsetse fly. And what happens is it goes in and it lives in your blood plasma, absorbs nutrients into it, and then, of course, causes those severe side effects. So this is it for Excavates. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me.